As I mentioned previously, the idea of being unbalanced is not a comfortable state for any design. We don't do well with being unbalanced. It's insecure, it's uncomfortable for us. And something being unbalanced is it's discomforting. We have issues with it. This is an example of lack of balance. There's nothing over here in this design that's going to keep this from dropping. And the visual weight of this and the visual weight of this and their relationship to each other and to the circle do not keep the circle stabilized. And so one thing being destabilized in the design can create issues throughout the entire design because the design is a gestalt. So to stabilize or to balance, basically what we can do is this. So we've extended this shape over and attached it to the left edge. And then seeing them together, you see the difference. This becomes now much more stabilized, and this isn't just this is just not strong enough to support the movement that's happening here. This also is unbalanced in a different way. This circle looks like it's going to drop straight out of the picture plane, or else it's going to hit the baseline and bounce out. So it's not going to stay there very long. This is too low and not doing anything really to support this, and not relating with the other gray shape very well. So here's a way to stabilize. And this is actually now enlarged and basically brought closer, and this now is not going anywhere. It's basically balanced. It's been counterbalanced, so it is now stationary within the design space. Unbalance is different than imbalance. Unbalance is something you don't ever want. It's like you can have positive space, you can have negative space, but you never want dead space. You can have balance, you can have imbalance, you never want lack of balance. But imbalance can be an effective tool depending upon what you're trying to do. For instance, in this painting, imbalance is used to help tell a story about this piano player. The piano is actually attached to the right edge of the image, the picture plane, and it actually is cantilevered out over into space, and we have a diagonal pull going with the figure and the shadow and the subtlety in the dress and so forth. And there's a faint kind of horizontal line, linear element coming in here, but it's very weak. And so we have this great big surround of empty space and the piano player cantilevered, and because of the diagonal on her, the heavy weight is out in here in midair. So it feels like this can pull off at any moment, but for the moment it is stable. What's happening here is that we're seeing the piano player as distant and isolated, and she is being separated from you, the viewer, or anything else that is going on. There's nothing around her, and she's over there by the wall, and there's a distance. She's mid-ground, she's not in the foreground. And this kind of reminds me of stories my grandmother used to tell when she was a teenager. She grew up in a fairly rigid value system, and was unable to actually participate in dancing and other forms of entertainment, but was able to play the piano. So she would go to parties, and she would play the piano while everybody else danced. And she always felt like the odd man out, so to speak. unable to participate because she wasn't allowed to participate in that kind of activity. And once she got married, she took up dancing with great fervor. And not sure what happened with the piano. She always had a piano, but anyway, so this painting reminds me of the stories that she used to tell about her youth, and it totally makes sense. And so we have the use of the imbalance visually in this actually helps isolate the pianist from the viewer and anything else that might be going on. In this Chagall, the top half is a lot heavier than the bottom half. The lightness and the light gray of the snow, the road and everything, doesn't have the strength to balance out all the activity and the diagonals that are going on here. And this figure, of course, becomes a center point, a focal point, and something's going to happen with this guy. So obviously he's at a strong angle, and he looks like he's falling or he's moving, and everything is kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with this. So there is an anticipation, a story that's being told. Notice how there's really nothing in the painting that is straight up vertical or exactly level, horizontal. Everything is at an angle, and that adds to the sense of movement, the sense of anticipation, and adds to the overall imbalance of the painting. This photograph is unbalanced, and the question would be, what makes it unbalanced? Can you tell? The strength of this diagonal is actually pulling everything down. The footing here, so to speak, on this little landing, this is not heavy enough or strong enough to hold this diagonal and this horizontal distance and the vertical distance going on with this set of windows. Remember that the set of windows are going to act as a single unit because of the Gestalt idea of proximity and also similarity. So we have two Gestalt issues going on here. We've got the color and the closeness of all the windows. And then the door is similar, and we have this diagonal. And its placement against the edge and this distance from the baseline of the photograph is not stable. And this is way too heavy. This is too light. It's basically going to pivot clockwise and going to throw this out into the, out into the back of beyond, so to speak. We have a little bit of shadow going on over here, which does bring it back a little more, but this is not enough to really make the whole thing stable. The position of the windows against the top edge, the fact that this is shot at an up angle and there's nothing really that is vertical and therefore addressing or similar to the vertical edges of the photo also help to create a lack of balance. And this is one of those things that, if you turned it sideways or upside down, it would be much more obvious in its lack of balance. This watercolor is also unbalanced, and it is basically the edge tension here and the distance here and the overlap of the edge here. The fact that it's shoved closer to the left edge and pulling away from the right edge, with this red kind of portion down here, the whole thing is coming to the left and dropping straight out of the picture plane. And probably if the colors were shifted given the shape of this, overall, this kind of heart shape. If the background colors were flipped and if this was moved further away from the left edge and more toward the center, not totally centered, but much more toward the center, or maybe even this is attached to the top edge in some way. Right now it's just basically wants to drop out of the picture plane. In other words, it's not stabilized. It's an interesting piece and a very interesting study, the curved against the straight and so forth, but it's not feeling all that great to look at. There's just something that seems off about it. This photograph is balanced. We have the figure there on the left, we have the bench he's sitting on, we have the implied line of the vent over here, we have the window here, and then we have, this is actually part of the roof line, this red triangle. This is actually balanced and stabilized by this, and this angle is also helping to give credence to this. And then the horizontality, the distance here, is helping this to stabilize. So we move in here and come down and land here, and then we come up into the figure. This is also useful to help balance, and it echoes the horizontality here in the window. So this is a balanced composition. Now the question to you is this imbalanced or unbalanced? And I'm actually going to let you think about that for a bit.